You have exactly 3 seconds to get on your knees before I make you eat this dirt, lady. Officer Nathan Hughes barked, his hand resting menacingly on his service weapon. I suggest you remove your hand from your holster, officer, the woman replied, her voice eerily calm as she knelt in the garden dirt. You have no idea whose property you're standing on. I don't care if you're the Queen of England, Nathan sneered, ripping his handcuffs from his belt. You're going away for a long time. He had no idea he had just handcuffed a 4-star general. The late July sun beat down unmercifully on the affluent, manicured streets of Alexandria, Virginia. It was the kind of neighborhood where the lawns looked like putting greens, and the houses were hidden behind towering wrought-iron gates and ancient oak trees. It was a haven for Washington, D.C.'s elite, senators, tech billionaires, and high-ranking officials. For Officer Nathan Hughes of the Alexandria Police Department, it was a hunting ground. Nathan was a man who wore his badge like a crown. At 34, he had built a reputation in the department as a proactive officer, a bureaucratic term that barely masked his true nature. A bully. He thrived on the power dynamic of the uniform. Over his 8-year career, Nathan had quietly built a tiny, corrupt empire in his district. He ran a network of kickbacks with local towing companies, intimidated residents who dared complain about his aggressive traffic stops, and used his authority to strike fear into anyone who didn't show him absolute subservience. He was untouchable, insulated by a police union that turned a blind eye to his escalating use of force reports. On this sweltering Tuesday afternoon, Nathan was cruising down Elmwood Drive in his Dodge Charger, the AC blasting, his Ray-Ban aviators shielding his eyes from the glare. As he passed a sprawling, multi-million-dollar colonial estate, something caught his eye. The front gate was propped open by a landscaping stone, and a woman was kneeling in the dirt near the mailbox, digging aggressively into the soil. Nathan slowed the cruiser to a crawl. He evaluated the woman. She was wearing a faded, sweat-stained olive-drab t-shirt, loose-fitting denim jeans, and muddy gardening gloves. Her hair was pulled back into a messy, utilitarian bun, and a smudge of dark soil stained her cheek. To Nathan's judgmental eye, she looked completely out of place in a neighborhood where the median home price was $4 million. He assumed she was a vagrant, or perhaps a rogue, unauthorized landscaper trespassing on one of his wealthy patrons' properties. This was exactly the kind of petty confrontation Nathan loved. It was an opportunity to assert dominance, to ruin someone's day, and to feel like a god among mere mortals. He threw the cruiser into park, not bothering to pull fully over, blocking half the lane. He stepped out, adjusting his heavy-duty belt, making sure his Motorola APX6000 radio and his taser were prominently displayed. "Hey, you!" Nathan shouted, his voice echoing down the quiet, tree-lined street. The woman didn't flinch. She simply finished patting the soil around a newly planted hydrangea's bush, slowly stood up and brushed the dirt from her knees. She turned to face him. Her expression was completely devoid of intimidation. Her eyes, a sharp, piercing grey, locked onto his with an intensity that, for a fleeting second, made Nathan's stomach drop. But his ego quickly squashed the momentary hesitation. "I'm talking to you!" Nathan aggressively closed the distance, his boots crunching loudly on the gravel driveway. "What business do you have on this property? Where's the homeowner?" "I am the homeowner," the woman said. Her voice was steady, modulated, and carried a natural cadence of authority that Nathan instantly despised. "And I'm currently busy. Is there a problem, officer?" She glanced at his chest. "Officer Hughes." Nathan scoffed, a cruel smirk twisting his lips. "You? The homeowner?" "Yeah, and I'm the President of the United States. I need to see your ID right now, lady. You're trespassing." "I'm standing on my own property," she replied, not moving an inch toward her pockets. "I am committing no crime, and under the Fourth Amendment, I am under no obligation to provide you with identification just because you demand it." Nathan's face flushed. The audacity. Nobody spoke to him like this. Not in his district. Not ever. The veins in his thick neck began to bulge. He tapped the Axon body camera on his chest to ensure it was recording. He wanted this on tape. He wanted to document how he handled non-compliant citizens. He was about to teach this woman a very painful lesson about respect. "Listen to me very carefully," Nathan said, his voice dropping an octave into a menacing growl. "You are interfering with a police investigation. You are refusing a lawful order. You have exactly 3 seconds to get on your knees before I make you eat this dirt, lady." He rested his hand on the grip of his Glock 19. It was an intimidation tactic he had used 100 times before. Usually, this was the moment the civilian broke. They would panic, stutter, cry, and frantically dig for their wallets. The woman did none of those things. "I suggest you remove your hand from your holster, officer," she replied, her voice eerily calm, cutting through the humid summer air like a surgical scalpel. "You have no idea whose property you're standing on. Escalate this further and it will be the final mistake of your professional career." For a split second, Nathan felt a flicker of unease. Her posture was flawless. She stood with her shoulders squared, her chin level, perfectly balanced on the balls of her feet. It was the stance of someone intimately familiar with violence, someone who had faced threats far more terrifying than a local beat cop. But Nathan was blinded by rage. To him, her calmness was an insult. It was a challenge to his absolute authority. "That's it. You're done," Nathan snapped. He lunged forward, grabbing her right arm with violent force, intending to spin her around and slam her against the brick pillar of the gate. To his absolute shock, she didn't stumble. When he grabbed her arm, it felt like grabbing a steel cable wrapped in flesh. She absorbed his momentum perfectly, stepping slightly to the side to mitigate his force, but she did not resist the arrest. She simply allowed him to twist her arms behind her back. "Stop resisting! Stop resisting!" Nathan yelled loudly for the benefit of his body camera, despite the fact that she was standing perfectly still, offering zero physical resistance. He ripped his heavy-duty steel handcuffs from his belt pouch. He clamped the metal around her wrists, squeezing the ratchets down viciously tight. He wanted them to bite into her skin. He wanted her to feel the pain. "You're under arrest for trespassing, failure to identify, and resisting a peace officer," Nathan panted, his adrenaline spiking as he shoved her roughly toward his cruiser. Across the street, the front door of a neighboring house creaked open. Mrs. Gable, an elderly woman whose husband was a retired federal judge, stepped onto her porch. Seeing the commotion, she pulled out her smartphone and immediately began recording, pointing the camera directly at Nathan's aggressive manhandling of the woman. "You're making a spectacle of yourself, Officer Hughes," the handcuffed woman said mildly as he pushed her against the hot metal of the police car. "I will give you one final opportunity to remove these cuffs, return to your vehicle, and drive away." "Shut your mouth!" Nathan barked, patting her down roughly. He reached into the front pocket of her jeans and pulled out a slim black leather wallet. "Let's see who you really are since you want to play games." He flipped the wallet open. Inside was a driver's license. He squinted at the name, Alicia Simmons. "All right, Alicia," Nathan sneered, pulling his radio mic to his mouth. "Let's see what warrants you have hiding in the system. I bet you've got a jacket a mile long." Alicia Simmons leaned against the cruiser, the hot metal burning through her thin T-shirt. She looked at Mrs. Gable across the street and gave a small, reassuring nod. Then she looked back at Nathan. "My name is Alicia Simmons," she said quietly, "and you have just initiated an international incident." Nathan chuckled darkly as he keyed his shoulder microphone. "Dispatch, this is Unit 4 Bravo. I need a 1029 and a 1027 on a female suspect. Name is Simmons, first name Alicia." Static crackled over the radio, followed by the bored voice of the precinct dispatcher, Brenda. "Copy, 4 Bravo. Stand by. Running Simmons, Alicia. Date of birth?" Nathan aggressively tilted Alicia's license to read the small print. Looks like October 14th, 1970. "Copy that. Processing." Nathan leaned against his cruiser, crossing his arms, looking down at his captive. "Well, Alicia, you're about to take a ride downtown. We're going to put you in a nice, cold holding cell while we figure out exactly what you're doing casing these houses." Alicia didn't respond. She just stared at him with that same unnerving steel-grey gaze. Suddenly, the radio erupted. But it wasn't Brenda's voice. It was the precinct's watch commander, Lieutenant Harris. His voice sounded strained, almost panicked, a tone Nathan had never heard from the veteran supervisor. "Unit 4, Bravo, this is Watch Commander. Officer Hughes, confirm the name. Did you say Alicia Simmons? DOB, October 14th, 1970? Nathan frowned. "Affirmative, Lieutenant. Got her in cuffs right now for trespassing and resisting. She was refusing to ID." There was a dead, heavy silence on the radio. 5 seconds passed, then 10. Nathan shifted uncomfortably. "Hughes," Lieutenant Harris's voice came back, but this time it was a harsh, urgent whisper. Do not move. Do not transport that suspect. Do not say another word to her. Under what authority did you detain her? Lieutenant, she was on a private estate. Hughes, shut up! Harris barked over the airwaves, abandoning all radio etiquette. You listen to me, and you listen to me good. The NCIC database just threw a code red Alpha 1 priority alert. The system locked up Brenda's computer. My phone is ringing off the hook, and caller ID says it's the Department of Defense. Hughes, who the hell do you have in handcuffs? Nathan's heart skipped a beat. Code red Alpha 1? That was a federal designation. In his mind, his ego twisted the narrative. He thought he had stumbled onto something massive. LT, she must be a high-value target, maybe a domestic terrorist or someone on a federal watch list. I'm telling you, she was casing the property. I've secured her. The situation is under control. Alicia sighed, shaking her head slightly in sheer disbelief at his stupidity. Officer Hughes, your reading comprehension is as poor as your situational awareness. Hughes! The radio screamed. Take the handcuffs off her, right now, that is an order. Negative, LT, Nathan replied, feeling a surge of defiant arrogance. He was the one on the scene. He was the one who caught a major fugitive. He wasn't going to let his spineless lieutenant take the credit. She was aggressive. I have her secured for my safety. I am transporting her to the precinct for federal handover. Before Lieutenant Harris could respond, a low, rumbling sound began to vibrate through the neighborhood. It wasn't the sound of a police cruiser. It was heavier, deeper. Nathan turned around. Coming down the pristine, tree-lined street of Elmwood Drive were three massive, jet-black Chevrolet Suburban Tahoes. They had heavily tinted windows, no license plates, and hidden strobe lights flashing rapidly behind their grills. They were moving incredibly fast for a residential street, their tires screeching as they cornered the block. Well, well, Nathan smiled, puffing out his chest. Looks like the feds got the alert. You're in deep trouble now, Alicia. The three black SUVs slammed on their brakes, perfectly boxing in Nathan's police cruiser. Dust and gravel kicked up into the air. Alicia Simmons finally smiled. It wasn't a warm smile. It was the smile of a predator watching a trap spring shut. They aren't here for me, Officer Hughes. They are here for you. The doors of the black SUVs flew open simultaneously. Men and women poured out, moving with terrifying synchronized precision. They weren't wearing police blues. They were wearing dark suits, tactical vests emblazoned with federal agent, and carrying short-barreled automatic rifles at the low ready. Among them were uniformed soldiers wearing the distinct brassards of the U.S. Army Criminal Investigation Division, CID. Nathan's arrogant smirk vanished, replaced by a cold, sudden dread. These people didn't look like they were here to congratulate him. They looked ready to wage war. A tall man in an immaculately tailored dark suit marched directly toward Nathan. He flashed a golden badge. Special Agent Vance, Department of Defense. Step away from the woman. Now. Whoa, hold on, Nathan stammered, his hand instinctively dropping toward his holster again. I'm the arresting officer on scene. This is my suspect. If you touch that weapon, local, I will put a hollow point through your shoulder before you clear the Kydex, Agent Vance said softly, his eyes dead and unblinking. It wasn't a threat, it was a simple statement of fact. Behind the tactical team, a fourth car arrived. It was a marked Alexandria police cruiser. The doors opened and Chief of Police Miller scrambled out. The chief was sweating profusely, his uniform rumpled, looking like he had just sprinted a mile. Hughes! Chief Miller screamed, running toward the scene. What the hell have you done? Are you insane? Chief, I caught a trespasser. She refused to ID. She resisted. Shut up, Chief Miller roared, his face purple with rage and terror. He physically shoved Nathan aside, rushing toward the handcuffed woman. Chief Miller stopped 2 feet away from Alicia, snapped his heels together, and executed a sharp, trembling salute. General Simmons, ma'am, I cannot express my profound apologies for this. This is an absolute catastrophe. Let me get those off you right now. Chief Miller fumbled for his own handcuff keys, his hands shaking violently. Nathan felt the blood drain from his face, the world tilted on its axis. He stumbled back a step, hitting the side of his cruiser. General? Alicia turned around, allowing the chief to unlock the cuffs. She rubbed her wrists, where the tight steel had left angry red welts. Thank you, Chief Miller, Alicia said, her voice echoing in the sudden silence of the street. She turned her attention to Nathan. The look in her eyes stripped away his badge, his gun, and his ego in a fraction of a second. "Officer Hughes," she said clearly, "allow me to introduce myself. I am General Alicia Simmons. I am a 4-star general in the United States Army. I am the commander of the United States Army Forces Command. I oversee 750,000 active duty and reserve soldiers, and as of yesterday, I am the legal owner of the property you are standing on." Nathan couldn't breathe. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. A 4-star general, one of the highest-ranking military officers on the planet, and he had just physically assaulted her, handcuffed her, and threatened to make her eat dirt over a perceived slight about gardening. I didn't know," Nathan finally choked out, his voice cracking. "You weren't in uniform. You didn't tell me." "A uniform does not demand respect, officer. The Constitution does," General Simmons replied coldly. "You approached me with hostility. You manufactured a crime. You bypassed my Fourth Amendment rights, initiated an unlawful arrest, and used excessive force. You did this because you believed I was powerless. You did this because you believed you were a king in this neighborhood." Agent Vance stepped forward, holding up an iPad. "Ma'am, we have secured the area. We also have confirmation that the neighbor across the street is live streaming the entire interaction to a local community page. Current viewership is at 42,000 and climbing." General Simmons looked across the street at Mrs. Gable, who was still holding her phone steady. "Excellent," General Simmons said. "Let them watch." General Simmons walked past Nathan, stepping into the center of the street so the neighbor's camera had a clear view. She was no longer a gardener in a dirty t-shirt. She was a commander surveying a battlefield. And Officer Nathan Hughes was the enemy she was about to annihilate. "For the record," General Simmons spoke clearly, projecting her voice, "what just occurred here was not an isolated incident. Before I moved to this district, my security detail conducted a threat assessment of the area. We do this for all high-ranking Department of Defense personnel." She paused, locking eyes with Chief Miller, who looked like he was about to faint. "Chief Miller, during our assessment, we pulled the civilian complaint records for this precinct. We found over 47 excessive force complaints, 32 complaints of racial profiling, and widespread allegations of extortion regarding local towing contracts. Over 80% of those complaints were centered around one man, Officer Nathan Hughes." Nathan felt his knees go weak. The empire he thought he had so carefully hidden was being laid bare in broad daylight, broadcast live to the world by a woman who commanded armies. "Your department buried those complaints, Chief," General Simmons continued, her tone merciless. "You allowed a predator to wear a badge. You allowed him to terrorize the citizens he swore an oath to protect. I experienced his policing firsthand today. If he is willing to physically assault an unknown woman in broad daylight for planting a bush on her own property, I shudder to think what he does in the dark to those who have no voice." "General, please," Chief Miller begged, wiping sweat from his forehead. "I swear to you we will handle this internally. Hughes is fired as of this second. He's done." "Internal affairs is no longer sufficient, Chief," General Simmons snapped. She gestured to the CID agents surrounding them. "This man assaulted a commissioned officer of the United States military. Furthermore, he violated my civil rights under the color of law, a direct violation of Title 18 U.S.C. Section 242. Therefore, this is no longer a local matter, it is a federal investigation." Agent Vance stepped up beside the general. "Chief Miller, as of right now, the Department of Justice Civil Rights Division is taking jurisdiction over Officer Hughes. Furthermore, the FBI is opening a racketeering investigation into your precinct regarding the towing kickbacks. We will be seizing all hard drives, communication logs, and body camera footage from your station within the hour." Nathan felt a sickening wave of nausea wash over him. He wasn't just fired, he was going to federal prison. His pension was gone. His reputation was destroyed. Everything he had built through intimidation and fear had been shattered in less than 15 minutes by a woman in gardening gloves. He looked around desperately. His fellow officers, who usually backed him up, were nowhere to be seen. He was surrounded by federal agents holding automatic weapons. The neighbors whom he had terrorized for years were coming out of their houses watching him fall. "You can't do this to me," Nathan suddenly screamed, a pathetic, desperate sound that cracked in the middle. "I'm a cop. I protect these streets. I made a mistake, that's all. You baited me. General Simmons slowly walked back to Nathan. She stood inches from his face. She didn't yell, she didn't posture. She simply delivered the killing blow to his ego. "I didn't bait you, Nathan. I just let you be exactly who you are, and who you are is a disgrace to that uniform. Remove his badge, Agent Vance." Agent Vance didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, grabbed the silver Alexandria police shield pinned to Nathan's chest, and violently yanked it off. The pin tore through the fabric of Nathan's uniform, leaving a jagged hole. "Turn around, Mr. Hughes," Vance ordered, emphasizing the Mr. He was no longer an officer, he was a suspect. Nathan's hands trembled violently as he slowly turned his back. The humiliation was absolute. He had forced hundreds of people into this exact position, relishing their fear. Now the terror was all his. Vance didn't use his own handcuffs. Instead, he reached into the pocket of Nathan's duty belt, pulling out the exact same steel cuffs Nathan had used on General Simmons minutes earlier. "Hands behind your back," Vance commanded. Nathan complied, a choked sob escaping his throat. The cold steel bit into his wrists. The clicking of the ratchets sounded like the locking mechanism of a vault door sealing him inside. "Nathan Hughes, you are under arrest for federal civil rights violations, assault under the color of law, and false imprisonment," Agent Vance recited, his voice devoid of emotion. "You have the right to remain silent. If you give up that right, anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." As the Miranda rights were read, the reality of the situation finally crushed the last remnants of Nathan's pride. He was crying now, tears streaming down his face, snot running from his nose. He looked pathetic. The tough guy facade had completely evaporated. Chief Miller watched the arrest, looking physically ill. He knew his own career was over as well. The federal investigation wouldn't stop with Hughes. It would burn through the precinct leadership that had enabled him. "Get him out of my sight," General Simmons said, turning her back on the blubbering ex-cop. Two massive federal agents grabbed Nathan by his upper arms and hauled him toward one of the black SUVs. As they shoved his head down to put him in the back seat, Nathan caught a final glimpse of the street. Mrs. Gable was still recording. Other neighbors were clapping. The door of the Tahoe slammed shut, sealing Nathan in the dark, air-conditioned interior. He was alone with his thoughts, the sound of his own heavy breathing, and the terrifying realization that his life, as he knew it, was over. Outside, General Simmons walked over to Chief Miller. "Chief," she said, her voice dropping to a conversational yet deadly serious tone, "I expect your full resignation on the mayor's desk by morning. If it is not, I will ensure the Department of Justice audits every single arrest your precinct has made in the last decade." "Yes, General, it will be there," Miller whispered, his eyes fixed on the pavement. "Good." General Simmons turned and walked back toward her yard. She stepped over the yellow police tape that the agents had begun stringing up to secure the crime scene. She knelt back down in the dirt next to her mailbox. She picked up her small gardening trowel, brushed some loose soil off the newly planted hydrangeas, and resumed her work. The storm she had unleashed was raging around her, tearing down a corrupt empire, but in her garden she had found her peace again. The fallout was catastrophic and swift. The live stream recorded by Mrs. Gable hit the internet before Nathan Hughes was even booked into federal holding. It went viral instantly, amassing millions of views within hours. The internet dubbed him the backyard bully, and the ensuing public outrage was a tidal wave that drowned the entire Alexandria Police Department. Within 24 hours, Chief Miller resigned in disgrace. The mayor, desperate to save his own political career, invited the DOJ to conduct a sweeping overhaul of the city's police force. The FBI investigation into Nathan's empire uncovered exactly what General Simmons had promised. They found a deep web of corruption. Nathan had been extorting money from two local towing companies, threatening to ruin their business if they didn't pay him kickbacks for directing lucrative accident recoveries their way. He had falsified over 50 police reports to justify unlawful arrests, targeting minorities and lower-income individuals who couldn't afford legal representation to fight back. He thought he was smart, he thought he was untouchable, but he had left a paper trail a mile wide, and federal forensic accountants tore through it in days. 6 months later, Nathan Hughes stood in a federal courtroom in Washington, D.C., wearing a bright orange jumpsuit. He looked drastically different. He had lost weight, His hair was thinning, and the arrogant swagger was permanently gone, replaced by a hollow, terrified stare. General Alicia Simmons was seated in the front row of the gallery. She was in her full Class A dress uniform, the 4 silver stars gleaming on her shoulders, rows of ribbons detailing a lifetime of distinguished service covering her chest. She sat perfectly still, her face an unreadable mask, watching as the judge delivered the sentence. For the civil rights violations, the assault, the racketeering, and the perjury, the judge showed no mercy. The badge he had worn was considered an aggravating factor. He had betrayed the public trust. "Nathan Hughes," the judge's voice boomed through the quiet courtroom. "You use the authority granted to you by the state not as a shield to protect the innocent, but as a weapon to terrorize them. You are a disgrace to the badge you wore. I sentence you to 12 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole." Nathan's legs gave out. If his lawyer hadn't caught him, he would have collapsed to the floor. The bailiff stepped forward, grabbed his arms, and hauled him away to begin his sentence. General Simmons stood up, smoothed her uniform jacket, and walked quietly out of the courtroom. She returned to her home on Elmwood Drive. The neighborhood was different now. The air felt cleaner. The residents walked their dogs and waved to one another without the looming fear of a corrupt cruiser pulling up beside them. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over her manicured lawn, General Simmons walked out to her front yard. The hydrangeas she had planted on that fateful summer afternoon were now in full bloom, their vibrant blue petals thriving in the rich soil. She smiled, pulled on her gardening gloves, and knelt in the dirt. What a satisfying ending! There is nothing quite like watching a corrupt bully get exactly what they deserve, especially when they mess with someone as powerful and composed as a 4-star general. Officer Nathan Hughes thought he ran the streets, but he found out the hard way that true power doesn't need to shout. It just waits for you to make a mistake. If you enjoyed this intense story of instant karma, justice, and the ultimate takedown of a corrupt cop, hit that like button right now. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this video with someone who loves a good revenge story, and hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss out on our daily dramatic stories. What would you have done in General Simmons's shoes? Let me know in the comments below.